In a world where people rush to prove themselves, where success is measured by how quickly results appear, there exists a rare kind of strength, the kind built in silence. This is the story of Aayan, a boy who chose patience over praise, perseverance over recognition, and in doing so, discovered the true art of quiet success. In a quiet village surrounded by rolling green hills and golden fields of wheat, there lived a young boy named Aayan. He was different from the other boys in the village, not because he was particularly strong or exceptionally intelligent, but because he was thoughtful and patient. While other children spent their days boasting about their achievements, who could run the fastest, who had the most cattle, who had the biggest house, Aayan remained quiet. He listened more than he spoke, and he observed more than he acted. The villagers often overlooked Aayan because he never tried to prove himself. Even his own friends sometimes laughed at him, calling him dull and unambitious. But Aayan didn't mind. He had learned from his father, a humble carpenter, that true worth was not in how much you spoke about yourself, but in how well you did your work. His father had built many houses in the village, yet he never boasted. "Let the strength of the walls speak for themselves," he would say. Aayan held on to these words, though he did not fully understand them yet. One evening, as Aayan was returning from the fields, he noticed a small gathering in the village square. An old man, dressed in simple but clean robes, had arrived and was speaking to the villagers. His face bore the lines of wisdom, and his eyes had the calmness of someone who had seen the world. The villagers respected the elderly, and so they listened carefully. The old man raised his hand, and in it, he held a tiny seed. "This," he said, "is more than just a seed. It is a lesson. Who among you is willing to take it and grow it?" The boys in the village rushed forward, eager to prove themselves. Each one wanted to be the one to grow the tallest plant. They all shouted, "I will grow it. Give it to me. My family has the best land." The old man smiled, his eyes scanning the crowd. Then, to everyone's surprise, he stepped forward and handed the seed to Aayan. The other boys groaned in disappointment. "Why him?" someone muttered. "He never even competes in anything." Aayan was surprised too. He looked at the seed resting in his palm. It was small, almost insignificant. "What do I do with it?" he asked the old man. "Plant it," the man said, "and nurture it with patience. This seed will teach you something no one else can." Aayan nodded and carefully tucked the seed into his pocket. The other boys, seeing that they had lost the chance, tried to console themselves by saying, "It's just a seed. Anyone can grow a plant. Let's see if he even remembers to water it." The next morning, Aayan woke up early and went to the backyard of his small house. He dug a small hole in the soil, placed the seed inside, and covered it gently. He fetched a pot of water from the well and poured just enough to moisten the soil. He stood back and smiled. It was a simple act, but it felt important. Days passed. Every morning and evening, Aayan watered the spot where he had planted the seed. The sun shone brightly during the day, and the cool breeze of the night carried the promise of new beginnings. But despite his care, nothing appeared. The soil remained unchanged. A week later, some of the village boys came by and saw him still tending to the empty patch of earth. They laughed. "Still nothing," one of them teased. "Maybe you planted it too deep." Another boy chuckled, "Or maybe he forgot to ask the seed for permission to grow." Aayan didn't respond. He simply continued his work. He remembered something his father once told him: the greatest things take time to show their worth. 2 months passed. The other boys, who had taken their own seeds from the fields, had already grown small plants. They paraded their success in front of Aayan, carrying their pots with pride. "Look at this," one boy boasted, showing off the green leaves sprouting from his plant. "This is what happens when you know how to grow things properly." Aayan nodded politely, but deep inside, he felt doubt creeping in. Had he done something wrong? Had he failed? Every day, he knelt by the soil, watching, hoping. But still, there was nothing. His father noticed his concern and sat down beside him one evening. "You have been tending to this spot for a long time," he said gently. "But I don't see any sign of growth. Are you sure the seed was good?" Aayan hesitated. "The old man gave it to me. He said it would teach me something. But, maybe I failed." His father put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Patience, my son. Some things take longer than others. Do not compare your growth with others. The tallest trees grow the slowest." Aayan took comfort in his father's words. He decided that no matter what, he would continue caring for the seed. He would not dig it up in frustration, nor would he abandon it just because others had grown faster. More months passed. The other boys' plants had grown taller, and their excitement had begun to fade. Some had even stopped caring for them, realizing that their plants weren't as impressive as they had hoped. Aayan, however, still watered his patch of earth every day, even though it looked no different than the day he had planted the seed. One day, the old man returned to the village. He walked through the fields, observing the plants that the boys had grown. They proudly showed him their small trees and bushes. He nodded approvingly but said little. Then, he came to Aayan's home. He saw the boy standing over the same patch of soil, watering it with quiet dedication. The old man smiled. "You are still here," he said. Aayan looked up. "Yes," he replied. "But, there is nothing." The old man chuckled softly. "Ah, but there is something. You just can't see it yet." Aayan frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" The old man knelt down beside the soil and placed his hand over it. "While the others' plants have grown quickly, their roots are shallow. When a strong storm comes, many of them will not survive. But your seed, it has been growing its roots deep into the ground, making itself strong from within. When it finally breaks through the soil, it will be unlike any other plant in this village." Aayan's eyes widened as the words sank in. He had been waiting for visible results, never realizing that true growth happens where no one can see. The old man stood up and patted Aayan's shoulder. "Do not be discouraged when you do not see immediate success. Real strength takes time. Keep nurturing it, and one day, you will understand why this waiting was necessary." Aayan bowed his head in gratitude. As the old man walked away, he felt something inside him shift. He no longer felt disappointment. Instead, he felt something much stronger, faith. And so, he continued his work, quietly and patiently, not for the approval of others, but because he now understood that real success was not about showing off, it was about becoming strong from within. The seasons changed, and Aayan remained patient. The villagers had stopped teasing him, mostly because they had grown bored of the joke. His empty patch of soil was no longer a source of amusement for them, but a strange mystery. Some of them still whispered about it when they passed by his house, but Aayan no longer paid attention. He had learned to ignore the noise of the world and focus only on what truly mattered. His routine remained the same. Every morning, before the sun had fully risen, he would carry a pot of water and pour it gently over the soil. He would sit beside it for a while, watching the ground, wondering about the unseen world beneath. At night, he would sometimes lie on his back, staring at the stars, and imagine the roots stretching deeper, searching for strength. He had come to trust the process, even if he did not fully understand it. One evening, as he was returning home from collecting firewood, he noticed that some of the other boys' plants had started to wither. Their once vibrant leaves had turned pale, their stems bending under their own weight. A few boys had already abandoned their plants, letting them dry up under the scorching sun. Aayan observed quietly, realizing that the old man's words were beginning to make sense. Despite their early success, their plants had not been strong enough to endure the changes in weather. The rains had been heavy this season, and then the heat had followed too soon. Their roots had been too shallow to reach the deeper moisture in the soil. Without strong foundations, they had flourished quickly but faded just as fast. Aayan continued his care for the unseen seed, his patience unwavering. He began to feel something different within himself, an understanding that went beyond the plant. The lessons he was learning were not just about growth but about life itself. One evening, his father came to sit beside him in the backyard. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the land, and a cool breeze whispered through the trees. His father watched him for a long moment before speaking. "You remind me of someone," he said with a small smile. Aayan turned to him, curious. "Who?" "My father," his father replied. "He was a farmer. Not the richest, not the most famous, but the most patient man I ever knew. He always told me that true strength is built in silence. That those who hurry to show results often end up losing more than they gain." Aayan listened carefully, absorbing every word. "I used to watch him work on his fields," his father continued. "While others rushed to plant their crops as soon as the first rain came, he would wait. He would study the soil, feel the wind, observe the sky. People thought he was wasting time. But when the unexpected storms came and washed away the early crops, his fields remained untouched. And when the right time finally arrived, his harvest was greater than anyone else's." Aayan thought about his own efforts, the long months of waiting. "So you're saying I should just trust the process?" His father nodded. "Not just trust it, understand it. Strength is built in ways that are not always visible. Whether it is a tree, a house, or a man, the foundation must always come first." Aayan took a deep breath. He had already felt this truth, but hearing it from his father made it even clearer. The thought of quitting had never truly crossed his mind, but now he was more certain than ever. Days turned into weeks, and the whispers about Aayan's seed faded completely. The villagers had more important things to worry about: the changing seasons, the trade market, the festival preparations. No one had time to think about a boy and his invisible plant. One evening, as Aayan was returning home from the well, he noticed someone waiting for him near his house. It was the old man. Aayan's heart leapt slightly in his chest. He hadn't seen him in months. The wise man was standing quietly, his hands folded behind his back, watching the patch of soil with a knowing expression. Aayan approached and greeted him respectfully. "You're back." The old man nodded. "And you're still tending to the seed?" Aayan smiled faintly. "Yes. Even though there's nothing to see." The old man chuckled. "You think there's nothing, but you're wrong." He stepped forward and placed his foot lightly on the soil. "Below this ground, a transformation has been taking place. The roots have been growing deeper than you can imagine. They have been strengthening, preparing, building a foundation so firm that when this plant finally rises, it will stand tall and unshaken." Aayan listened, his chest filling with something he couldn't quite describe. It was a mixture of relief, pride, and deep understanding. "Tell me, Aayan," the old man said, turning to him. "What have you learned from this?" Aayan thought for a moment before answering. "That true strength is built where no one can see. That rushing for quick success leads to shallow roots. And that patience is not about waiting, it's about trusting the process." The old man smiled. "You have learned well." He turned his gaze back to the soil. "Most people seek the rewards before they've built the foundation. They want to show results before they've done the real work. But what they fail to realize is that success that comes too quickly is often weak. It is the silent work, the unseen effort, that makes the greatest difference." Aayan looked down at the soil, feeling a new sense of respect for what lay beneath. He no longer felt impatience. He no longer compared himself to others. He understood now that what he was doing was far greater than simply growing a plant. The old man placed a hand on Aayan's shoulder. The world will always have people who chase recognition, who seek to prove themselves through noise and display. But the strongest ones, the ones who last, are those who build in silence. They do not need to show off, because their success will speak for itself when the time is right. Aayan nodded slowly. He felt no anger toward those who had mocked him before, no resentment toward those who had achieved quicker results. He only felt peace, knowing that his path was different, and that was perfectly fine. As the old man walked away, disappearing into the golden light of the setting sun, Aayan turned back to his small patch of soil. He kneeled beside it, ran his fingers gently over the earth, and smiled. He knew that something incredible was happening beneath the surface. And when the time came, it would be worth every moment of waiting. The morning sun rose gently over the village, casting a golden glow on the land. The sky, painted in hues of orange and pink, promised a new day, another step forward. Aayan woke up early, as he always did, and made his way to the small patch of soil he had been tending for so long. But something was different today. As he knelt down, preparing to water the earth as he had done every morning, his breath caught in his throat. There, emerging from the soil, was a tiny green shoot. It was small, fragile-looking, but unmistakably alive. Aayan stared at it in awe, his heart pounding. After all the months of waiting, after enduring the teasing and doubts, after trusting in something he could not see, the moment had finally arrived. He gently reached out and touched the tiny leaf, feeling the soft texture between his fingers. A deep sense of satisfaction filled him, not the kind that made him want to run and boast to the villagers, but the kind that settled warmly in his chest, a quiet but powerful confirmation that patience had been worth it. Aayan sat beside the plant for a long time, watching as the sunlight touched its delicate form. He knew that this was just the beginning. The real growth, the real strength, would take more time. But he had already learned the most important lesson: true success is not about how quickly something grows, but how strong it becomes over time. As the days passed, the tiny shoot stretched taller, its leaves unfurling, its stem thickening. Aayan continued his daily routine, caring for it just as he always had, but with a new sense of joy. It was no longer just an unseen promise beneath the earth, it was a living reality, proof that silent effort never goes to waste. Word soon spread through the village. Those who had once mocked Aayan for wasting his time now came to see the plant that had taken so long to emerge. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others simply stood in silence, realizing that they had underestimated both the boy and his seed. One afternoon, a group of boys who had once teased Aayan approached him as he watered the plant. One of them, the same boy who had once paraded his fast-growing plant in front of Aayan, scratched the back of his head awkwardly before speaking. You really waited all this time for it?" he asked. Aayan nodded, not with arrogance, but with quiet confidence. "Yes." Another boy, staring at the strong stem of Aayan's plant, sighed. "Mine didn't last more than a season. It grew fast, but it couldn't survive the heavy rains." Aayan glanced at him and gave a small smile. "It's because the roots weren't deep enough. When something grows too fast without a strong foundation, it can't withstand the storms." The boys fell silent. They had all learned this lesson the hard way, but Aayan had learned it before his plant had even surfaced. They realized now that while they had been focused on quick success, Aayan had been focused on something greater, lasting strength. Days turned into weeks, and Aayan's plant continued to grow. It became taller than any other plant in the village, its branches stretching outward, its roots unseen but firm beneath the earth. The villagers, who had once dismissed Aayan's efforts, now admired the mighty plant that stood proudly in his backyard. Even the elders of the village began to speak of it as a symbol of resilience and patience. One evening, as Aayan sat beneath the shade of his growing tree, the old man returned. His wise eyes gleamed with quiet pride as he observed the plant. He nodded approvingly and then turned to Aayan. "You understand now, don't you?" he asked. Aayan looked up at the tree, then back at the old man. Yes, he said. I understand that real success doesn't come from rushing. It comes from patience, from unseen effort, from trusting the process even when there are no immediate results. The old man smiled. And do you see why I chose you to receive the seed? Aayan thought for a moment before answering. Because you knew I wouldn't give up. You knew I wouldn't plant it just to prove something to others. You knew I would wait. The old man nodded again. Many people in this world seek recognition. They want to be seen, to be praised, to show their success quickly. But the greatest things, whether it be a tree, a skill, or even a person, are built in silence. They do not need to show off, because when the time is right, their strength will speak for itself. Aayan felt those words settle deep within him. He looked around the village, where people still hurried to prove themselves, to gain admiration. He realized that he no longer needed that. He had something far more valuable: patience, resilience, and an unshakable foundation. As the years passed, Aayan's plant grew into a magnificent tree, its roots deep, its branches wide, offering shade and comfort to those who sat beneath it. It became more than just a plant, it became a symbol. A symbol of quiet strength, of patience, of the kind of success that does not need to be flaunted. And as Aayan sat beneath its branches, listening to the rustling leaves, he smiled. He had learned the greatest lesson of all. True success is never about showing off. It is about becoming so strong that you no longer need to.